Welcome game chasers everywhere to episode 20 of The Collecting Confidant with your host GunstarHero. And I'm back this week with a whopper of a retro collection. You know I love my compilations, but this one is huge, hotly anticipated, and as you'll see from this video, I believe this is going to redefine how retro compilations are looked at and made from here on in. We're going to be talking about Konami's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Cowabunga Collection, which is slated for physical and digital release on October 30th, 2022, is coming to all major platforms, but is getting physical releases for the PS4, PS5, Nintendo Switch, and the Xbox One and Series X. Now, this lovely compilation of 13 classic games from the 8-bit and 16-bit and arcade eras is coming to us via Digital Eclipse, and they are no stranger to retro compilations. In fact, they're some of the best in the business. As you can see, I'm kind of a big fan. They've done stuff like the Mega Man Collection Legacy Volume 1. They did the Street Fighter 30th Anniversary compilation, the Disney Collection. They did the SNK 40th Anniversary. So they are no strangers to quality. But I'm telling you right now, the love, devotion, dedication, and fan service they put into the Cowabunga Collection is going to set the standard to come. And we're going to get into some of the features of what makes this compilation so great. Then we're going to run down the games that are included in it. And finally, get into the physical version, which is going to be available from all major retailers in both a standard version for the PS4, PS5, Switch, and Xbox One, and then a limited edition, which I'm pretty sure is going to get another release window. So if you missed out on that first wave, I think you might be getting another chance soon enough. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Okay, let's get into some of the features of the game first. Now, like any good retro compilation in the modern era, this is firstly going to include little quality of life features like save states, rewind features. It's going to have button remapping, and even enhancements for some of the games. So for example, in the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which came out in 1989 for the NES, there were some problems with flicker and stuff like that, right? Like screen tearing. You can actually choose to take that stuff out and actually make the game more perfect, which I know will be egregious to purists, but of course you can still play this game in their original formats as well, which is kind of nice that you get the choice. Also, what's really cool about this is you'll actually get to play the Japanese versions of the majority of these titles at a button press. Basically, 11 of the 13 games will get the Japanese versions on this as well. The only two games that were never released in Japan would be the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game from '89, and then Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters for the NES out of 1993. Otherwise, you'll have multi-versions. Very cool that you can switch on and off between them. But now, in terms of quality of life, I'm going to talk about this one right off the bat because it's the most exciting feature and has got people talking. This is the watch mode, which is, for me, a first. I've never seen this done before, and I want to see this being done from now on, where they've actually made a feature now where if you're having trouble with one of the games, you can watch a speed run version of it that takes virtually no damage and look at the strategies for getting past certain bosses, certain difficult areas, but then at the top of a button, you can get back into the game and take over where the AI left over. I think that is so cool, and especially for notoriously punishing games like the first Ninja Turtles for the NES, which is still brutal to this day. To be able to see somebody else do this and then learn the mechanics, jump in there yourself and try it for yourself, I think is revolutionary. And again, I think is a feature that needs to be adopted in all major retro reissues from here on in. So very cool stuff. Congratulations to Digital Eclipse for putting in that function. But it doesn't even stop there. You can tell that the developer had a true love for these classic games in the fact that they're also including cool stuff like an in-game Nintendo Power strategy guide, which is full color. And even within the strategy guide, it'll not only tell you how to get past certain difficult moments, but also include little watch-along clips. So one of the cool ones, for example, is remember in the original Ninja Turtle game for NES, when you have that Rocksteady boss fight, most of us knew that there was a little cheat where you could go to the top of the crates, strike downwards and hit him in the head. That was one of those little things we knew about back in the day. Well, the strategy guide actually teaches you how to do that, which again, mind-blowing, such cool fan service and pure nostalgia. I love this kind of stuff. But the nostalgia doesn't stop there. The game's also going to have an in-game museum, which is in the Turtles lair, where you can see a whole bunch of cool stuff, including unseen development art, sketches, design materials, promotional materials, and original advertisements you would have seen in the video game magazines. There's comic book covers, there's stills from the actual animated series from 1987. There is so much fan service and reverence for this franchise. I can't believe it. It's wonderful. What else? On top of that, any games that had local couch co-op are going to have those features supported, but now there's also going to be online functionality for a select few of the games, most notably both arcade games. There'll be the original Ninja Turtles from 1989, the sequel Turtles in Time will have online functionality. You'll also be getting online for Hyperstone Heist on the Genesis, and finally Tournament Fighters on the Super Nintendo, and the developer Digital Eclipse has claimed that has been optimized for esports. So we're going to see how well they fare with implementing the netcode to get that low latency down, but I'm excited to hear about these developments. So very cool in terms of the features, lots of stuff to get excited about. And in addition, you're going to have multiple versions of the same game in some instances where you'll have the arcade version, the home port, and you'll be able to see the differences between each of them, and especially in terms of the home ports, how they actually exceeded the arcade games in terms of quality and value in most cases. Okay, so let's now run down the list of games, and then we'll get shortly into the physical versions. So let's start it all off with the very first one. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from 1989 for the NES. This is that notorious side-scrolling action platformer with the really brutal difficulty, the respawning enemies, and of course there's that notorious underwater swimming level through the Hudson River where you have to disarm bombs. I'm going to say this, I did play a little bit of this game in preparation for the video, and I went through the river in one try, no deaths. I am the champion of that level, and I don't need a watch along to get through it. So bravo for me, but the rest of the game is brutally difficult, and I will appreciate being able to do the watch along and figure out some of the more intense moments, because let's face it, the game hasn't aged very well, but the nostalgia is there. When I was growing up, everyone had this game. The music was on point, the controls were fantastic, and we loved Ninja Turtles so much that we put up with some of the blaring problems with this game. But again, there are enhancements to it. There's a way of watching others beat it, so there is a way to see the ending of this game if you truly want to see it. Coming up after that, we also have Ninja Turtles, the arcade game, also from 1989. This was the one that set the world on fire that year. Nobody had seen games like this. The graphics were incredible. The reverence for the show. It really felt like you were playing the show at the tender age of 9. This game would go on to win multiple awards and then eventually get a home port. This is intact, and like I said, you can play this online with friends as well. So this one had a lot of charm, personality, and I believe still holds up to this day. Okay, next up on the list, you've got the home port of the arcade game, which came out for the NES in 1990, TMNT 2, the arcade game. And this game is still celebrated as not only one of the best NES games of all time, but a truly impressive port for what was being done at the time. When I got this game at Christmas 1990, I just could not believe how much they were able to squeeze into this game. And not only that, but add to the arcade game, where there's actually 2 new levels and 2 new bosses that didn't show up in the original arcade game. Plus, just the sound, the graphics really pushed the NES to the limit. And plus, what was cool about this game back in the day was on the back of the instruction manual, you got a coupon for a free personal pan pizza, which of course is now being included in Shredder's Revenge physical copies as a nice tip of the hat to the old arcade game port for the NES. So that came out in 1990. Also 1990, you'll be getting TMNT Fall of the Foot Clan, which was the first of the trilogy of Game Boy games. I don't have this game anymore, so I didn't really get to play it in preparation for the video, but I do remember not particularly being too crazy about this game back in the day. The graphics were decent for the Game Boy, but I felt it was a little stiff, a little wooden, a bit short, and didn't really have the speed and control fluency of the other games. Regardless though, for completionists and nostalgia, it's here and it's intact and still worth revisiting for historical purposes and nostalgia. After that, we start getting into the golden era, which is the Turtles in Time era. So we're moving into 1991. Both the arcade versions and the Super Nintendo versions of Turtles in Time are here intact. Like I said, the arcade version is playable online, and it's just fascinating to see not only how close the port on the Super Nintendo was the arcade. Like, it's almost identical, minus a few animations and some graphics. It is so close, but then the Super Nintendo added so much more because they were really trying to push the Mode 7 capability of the Super Nintendo at the time. So you'll get little cool things like, for example, the Neon City Riders level, which was side-scrolling in the arcade version, is actually like over-the-shoulder first person in the Super Nintendo version, in addition to cool boss battles like in the Technodrome, where you get to throw foot soldiers into the screen. You couldn't do that in the arcade, so it's very cool. But still, the arcade version's very good because I think it's a little faster, plays a little bit better, and like I said, you can go online and hop in with your buddies and play that too. So cool to see both of those versions included from 1991. Also, from 1991, you get TMNT Back from the Sewers, which was the sequel to Follow the Foot Clan on the Game Boy. That's included here as well. I never actually owned this one, but I did watch some videos in preparation, and I found that it seemed a little stiff, a little wooden, doesn't hold up as well, but it's still good to have this included, so bravo for its inclusion. Moving into 1992, then we get the counterpart to Turtles in Time on the Sega Genesis, which was the Hyperstone Heist, which I owned. I didn't have Turtles Time back in the day. I had a Genesis, so I had Hyperstone Heist. And this game is a lot different. It does borrow a lot of elements from Turtles in Time, like the soundtrack, a bunch of the stages, but it has its own unique flair. The stages are a bit longer. I would say this game plays faster than Turtles in Time on the Super Nintendo, and the AI is just a little bit more aggressive, and the game is different enough that it stands alone as a nice counterpart to Turtles in Time, so you don't really have to choose one or the other. They're both great in their own right, even though, admittedly, Turtles in Time looks a little bit better, but Hyperstone Heist has a lot to say for on its own, so definitely worth revisiting and playing. I beat both Turtles in Time and Hyperstone Heist in preparation for this video and loved both of them equally. Also, 1992, you get the third game in the trilogy of the NES, Manhattan Project, which was a late release for the NES, and this one I didn't play a lot of back in the day because I was already into the 16-bit era, but I would say this builds on what Turtles 2, the arcade game, established for the NES and just takes it even further in terms of adding new moves. Now you can throw the enemies over your shoulder, in addition to each of the Turtles having their own special moves. The game's a lot longer, includes a lot more fan service to the television show and the comic books. So Manhattan Project is one of those unsung NES classics that you definitely need to play, and it holds up very well, and it again pushes the NES both graphically and sound-wise to its limits. So a lot of cool things in Manhattan Project, definitely worth revisiting. Finally, now we're moving into 1993. To begin with, we get the third game in the Game Boy trilogy, which was Radical Rescue. Now this one was not as popular, so it has gone up extremely high in value, but I would say this is the most enticing out of all the Game Boy versions in the fact that they tried to go with a Metroidvania approach to this game, and I think that's actually kind of fascinating. But then wrapping up the year of 1993, we get all three versions of TMNT Tournament Fighters, and this came out at the peak of the Street Fighter II Mortal Kombat fighting craze era. I didn't play these games a lot back then because I was already kind of burnt out on fighting games. There were just so many games at that point trying to be like Street Fighter II that I bypassed this game. But what's interesting about revisiting them is that each of the different platforms, the Super Nintendo, Genesis, and NES, got their own specific game with its own specific character roster and storylines. So something very cool to revisit. Especially, I've been told that the Super Nintendo version was very well regarded, has been tuned very well for this compilation, and like I said earlier, is being optimized for the esports scene. So I doubt this is the last we're going to be hearing about this one, and it's very cool to revisit in that regard. So very cool long list of 13 games in this compilation. As you can see, there is a tremendous amount of value for the price tag of $39.99, which you're going to pay for either digitally or at retail for the physical format. So if you are a collector, I highly suggest picking this up on the PS4, PS5, Switch, or the Xbox One, your platform of choice as of August 30th, 2022. If you are a Turtles fan, you will not be disappointed. Like I said, Digital Eclipse, in my mind, is the leader of retro compilations, and they are just pushing it even further with this incredible compilation. Can't wait to get my hands on it. You've been watching the 20th episode of The Collecting Confidant with your host, GunstarHero. Make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. Later, Game Chasers, and peace.